from. Tell your girl she can kick it if she wants some, but we got no time to waste.
In the year 2026, now that we're officially in 2026. Happy New Year, everyone. Sarah Beth, quick plot description. Not that you need it, but it had been a minute since I've seen this film. So I need it. Perhaps our audience could use a refresher. Mike Steph is always prepared, so he's good to go. But alas, The Outsiders. It is a coming-of-age drama about teens growing up in the 1950s Midwest. What could possibly go wrong here? Everything. The story revolves around rival gangs and, of course, the consequences that follow their very violent lives. Sarah Beth, we're going to kick it to you. What did the film get right about school?
I think this one, because again, this is a film that does not technically take place like within school, but it's focused on school-aged kids in the 1950s. The reason I had recommended it for this podcast series, besides the fact that I do also have a stapled tattoo with my best friend, but so it's been my favorite novel since I was 7th, 8th grade. And I don't know a single mostly girl that did not have their like first crush was on a greaser. Like most 7th and 8th grade, that this is an assigned novel usually at some point, and I think everybody at some point has read it and like fallen in love with the characters in the story. The way in which Essie Hinton writes them is very relatable, even though again they're 1950s. I went to high school in the early 2000s. Like those are two completely different generational things, but the way in which it's very much a class division of the haves and the have-nots that lead into, and very similar too to kind of like Bust and Loose, that like your choices don't define who you are, and you don't have to be who people like have stereotyped you to be. And so within it, you know, all the characters are really kind of figuring out who they are within their social dynamics. There's a heavy emphasis on like found family. Many of the characters either come from, like Johnny comes from an abusive household. One of the first scenes is him staying out. That's how they end up at the park, is him and Ponyboy end up falling asleep outside because Johnny doesn't want to go home because his parents are screaming and fighting. Ponyboy's parents had died in the car accident, so he's being raised by his two older brothers, one who's still high school age, the other one who had graduated high school. The brother Soda Pop had dropped out so that they could both provide so that Ponyboy can stay in school. You know, you've got Dallas Winston, who is very rough around the edges, and his description in the book, and I think they translated over to the movie too, about how like he likes to fight, like pick on kids, just these things of like, they're these characters that have had these very hard lives, and some of them, like in Dallas's case, is like chosen to like let that define him. And then you've got like Ponyboy and Johnny, where they're more like softer and they've been through these experiences. And so like thinking back, one just like as like middle school, high school, reading and watching this movie, how relatable that was. But then as like I stepped into education and like recognizing like every kid has a story, and that they're so pressured by everything around them, trying to figure out who they are. They're either being pressured by their family to be a certain type of person, their friend group, their socioeconomic status. And so I think it gets so much right about just what it is to be a teen. And growing up and figuring out who you are and who you want to be. And so I think it gets a lot right in that aspect, even though it's not technically about school.
Right. Everyone has a story. Amen. I'm thinking now, Sir Beth, who do I want to be when I grow up? I need to ponder that. Yeah. It's one of your favorites, obviously.
It is.
Is there anything that stood out to you in terms of what the film embellishes about this experience?
I mean, I think our embellishments, we're looking at early on, you know, the big thing is Ponyboy and Johnny end up in hiding because in an act of self-defense, Johnny kills one of the socias. And so they're on the run. I mean, I think that piece I don't think a lot of kids end up in that position. So I don't know like if embellished is the right word. But just how it like transcribes, right? So then they go and they live in the church, and the church ends up catching on fire, and they're saving these kids out, and that's how Johnny ends up getting hurt and like ultimately like dying of his wounds. And so I think a lot of the pieces all together are very, I don't want to say like far-fetched, because I do know S.E. Hinton wrote a lot of this based on her experiences. So it's not like a true story, but it's based on what she witnessed growing up. But I think there's like parts where it's just like a lot. I do think one of the things they do get right though is how like it's a very teenage response when our brains are not fully developed, of like they went to Dallas instead of like going to I can't remember his brother's name. Derry, right? Like they don't go to like the reasonable person to go help them. They go to Dallas because Dally's been in trouble, right? That's who we're gonna go to. And so like I think some of it too, right? Even though yes, it feels very almost like far-fetched, right? Like they hop a train and they run away, and like they're in the church and like they're dyeing their hair with peroxide and like all these pieces. But then, like, I think back, and even though that does feel very far-fetched, as a teenager, like, we've all made really dumb decisions as teenagers, and then either tried to, like, fix it ourselves or cover or literally just run away from it, and it just gets, like, worse and worse. And so now instead of, like, having, like, one problem, I've got, like, 10. And so some of it, like, I guess it feels very embellished, but then again, when you think about, like, teens, like that's such a natural response, right? Like I'm panicking, I'm going to go to the person that's always in trouble because they're going to help me, and I'm going to follow their advice, which they did, but then, and that wasn't great advice. But also you throw in like the class warfare, like they knew they couldn't go to the cops really because they knew it was going to not go in their favor. So
would this film, my final question for you, then we're gonna hear from Mike Steph. Would this film be made today, Sarah Beth?
Well, you know, there's a musical now on Broadway.
You raise a great point. Shout out to our fellow
musical,
Broadway fans out there.
I don't know how I feel about it. Like,
okay, do tell.
It's just it's hard. I love this movie and I love this book, and so I don't know how I feel because I haven't seen it as part of it. I don't know what justice it does, but I do think it could be made today. I mean, I stand with like what Mike said in the last episode of like, I wouldn't want it to be made today. But I think there's a reason that so many ELA teachers continue to assign this book and this subsequent movie, because like everyone I've talked to, that's when they read the book and they watched the movie in 7th or 8th grade. And I think it's just such a coming of age tale that there's so much that we can still relate to, even though we can't relate to being a teenager in Oklahoma in 1950.
Right. Maybe when it reaches Gamage or closer to your parts, Broadway in Tucson, we're going to expect you there and expect a review on this podcast. This is true. Mike Steph, jump in. What do you think overall? Your response? What The Outsiders gets right, embellishments, and then finally,
they get nothing wrong. To be clear,
they get nothing wrong. To be clear, Mike Steph. To that, you say what?
No, I definitely agree. This is my first time watching the movie, to be honest. I don't remember reading it in school, but I do remember my late son Nakai. I think he read it in school, and I know he liked it, and I think he might have watched the movie. And like I said, I've never made a point of, oh, let me check this, let me check that. So in so many ways, I'm watching this from also like personal experience, knowing that my son did enjoy the story, and also the story itself. I'm not gonna lie, I became very emotional. I can see a lot of what was being spelled out or what was being put on camera, I could kind of see that the parallel to life, real life. Even now, like Sarah Beth said, it could be done today. I don't want it to be done, just for the fact that there's a musical. I mean, I'm going to try to bring some levity to this. Like, I don't want to go to a musical. And maybe, like I said, maybe this is just me being ignorant of musicals, but I don't want to go to a musical and then the fire scene, all of a sudden you just see all the kids like, or when Johnny is saving Ponyboy from getting drowned, all of a sudden you just hear stab. Like I don't want to see that. Because it's like trivializes what's going on. I didn't even realize that there's so many. It was not only a come of age during a movie, it was a come of age of a lot of actors too. You had Emilio Estevez, you had Rob Lowe, you had Matt Dillon. I didn't even. I was like, Dawn, I know that girl. I know that girl.
Patrick
Diane
Swayze,
Lane.
Diane
Yeah, it
Lane,
was so
Thomas
it's so many.
Howell.
Yeah, see Thomas Powell. He's famous to me for Soul Man, which is another
Mhm.
80s movie.
Mhm.
One of my favorite movies. I haven't seen that in a while, so I'm probably going to see that pretty soon. But what it embellishes, I mean, yeah, you could say, yeah, getting into the freight car and going someplace, yeah, but also it's plausible, because they are in rural area, in the deep South, in the 50s and 60s where there are train tracks. I mean, going back to the Stand By Me, that was set in the 50s and 60s. What did they do? The whole story was them going along a train track to find what they was looking for. So it is plausible. Now, what does it get right about school? Even though it wasn't in the school setting, that's easy. The class system in school, and especially in high school, the cool kids, the weird kids, the goth kids, the smart kids, the so forth, all different type of classes. There's so many divisions in school, but then at the same time, there are situations where people from different backgrounds do find a common ground. Like when Ponyboy and one of the socials have a talk in the car right before the big rumble, right? And all right, damn, like you're not, you don't, and you're not going to consider me a social. So when they got back to their respective groups, oh, what did y'all talk about? What that greaser? Nah, his name is such and such. Or yeah, the social. No, his name is such and such. To me, that was a big part of the film, especially knowing John. One of Johnny's last words were like, it. It's very apropos that he died after realizing that there was this big fight that solved nothing. So it's like, all right, well, I did my part for, saving the children in the fire, you know. But as for this bigger issue of class, even with that, nothing's changed. So it's like, all right, I'll bow out right now. Like I can sleep, I can go to rest knowing that I was at least part of the change, So um like I said, I think that's what it gets right about school. And yeah, I think I answered check.
You sure did. You listen. You two are both in your respective bags. I didn't want to interrupt. In terms of what I appreciate about The Outsiders, great pick, Sarah Beth. The meditation that this is specifically about the teenage boy experience. I know we have rival gangs, and as Mike said during episode 1, it's the Hollywood of it all. But just that reflection on, I think, how a lot of our boys are taught to just be very violent and to have beefs with peers, often over just seemingly simple reasons. This is far less stakes than rival gangs in Midwest America. But I'm thinking even back to the fall semester, and sometimes how I'll just observe the behavior of our kids, and particularly boys. And sometimes it's like they pick fights with each other for no reason. We can be playing a Kahoot game, and then somehow from when we start to when we finish, the competition just intensifies, and one boy is bragging because he just won the game, and then who I think is their friend, but I guess they're rivals now, is like, oh yeah, well, hey, your girlfriend's cheating on you, now what? And I'm like, yo, I don't know if that's a joke or if you kind of said that with your chat. Like, what are we doing here? And I think a lot of that is learned behavior, not necessarily just at potentially at home. I don't think that's the case here, but I think the examples our kids see on social media or
Social media.
just in so many places of just
Mhm.
being aggressive, being out of pocket, and how that can get rewarded with views or other monetary
Mhm.
compensation. I just often wonder who are the role models for our kids, period, but specifically for our young men. And I'm thinking outside of the household, like celebrity wise, famous people. Who are those figures that they're looking up to? I think there is a part of the internet community that is really working to enhance and amplify messages about what it means to be a man that I just so vehemently disagree with. It is not necessarily being the loudest person in the room or the person who has to pick a fight with everyone or demean other people. And I really enjoy, like I said, how The Outsiders portrays just that teenage young male experience and potentially the dangers, obviously, as you laid out, Sarah Beth, of what that can lead to if you maybe don't check your behavior, hold the people around you accountable. So again, not a one-to-one comparison, Kahoot game during second period versus rival gangs in the Midwest in the 50s and lives being lost. But I think about what our boys are experiencing and how that is very different than when we and specifically when I went to high school. A lot has changed since then.
Well, and I think that's a really good point because that's one of the big themes. Like one of my favorite scenes in the movie is after they're at the church and they're outside, and I forget if they've either cut Johnny's hair or they've dyed pony boys, but they have this conversation around, and it was one of the reasons why, again, my childhood best friend and I both have stay gold tattooed because I was introduced to the movie. I brought the movie to her. Then we had in 8th grade, we read it. But he has this line where he's talking to him and he says, like the way you did sunsets, pony boy, that's like a good way to be that way. And he's relating it to the stay gold from the Robert Frost poem. And I think it's that like point of like, even like Johnny recognizing like, hey, everyone else like in our neighborhood has hardened themselves, right? Like, and it's even talked about more so in the books, like his brothers are very good people, but they've hardened themselves. That's why he couldn't go to his oldest brother, because he felt like his oldest brother hated him. But they're so exhausted from having to work to make sure that DCS or CPS doesn't take pony, like these pieces, right? So they're sacrificing a lot. And I think that's some of it too. Like we have this like mindset of like grinding all the time, like all these pieces that like you're supposed to be like hard, like to everything. You're not supposed to let things bother you. A lot of that like toxic masculinity, like you don't show emotion, you don't. And I think this was one of the first movies where they really started to kind of like explore it of like, hey, no, it's cool to like keep watching the sunsets. Because he even talks in Johnny's letter before he dies, where he talks about like, I don't think Dolly's ever seen the sunset. Like, make sure he sees the sunset. And when you're constantly like in survival mode, you don't get to like it's an interesting concept, but like when you really like think about those pieces like all together and like the way in which like we're seeing it now, yeah, it looks different. But who do we want our kids to be?
Yeah, we love them so much, and we know the greatness that they're capable of. Mike Steph, any last words before we get out of here? Closing up day 2.
No, I think everything has been said. I'm sorry, I'm a little emotional right now. So there's a lot in this movie. I'm shocked it took me over 40 years to watch it. But there's a lot in this movie that I can kind of relate to. So I'm kind of just like processing it in my mind again as we're talking about it. So no, I'm on board with y'all.
That's beautiful. Thank you, brother. Well, thank you both for being here with me, and thank you all for tuning in. We'd love to know what you think of The Outsiders. You can drop us a comment here on YouTube or reach us across the social spaces at 4AZ Teach. We will see you tomorrow for day 3, in which we'll be discussing Spike Lee's 1988 film, School Days. We'll see you then.